No, it is. It's just taking its time.
Okay. Okay.
You see it?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep,
Okay, so Mrs. Sandy Freshcat, originally from Wilkes-Barre, PA, earned her BA in history from Stern College for Women. After spending a year learning in Israel in 1978, she married and teamed up with her musician husband to write and produce a series of popular children's CDs. Mrs. Freshtat began learning at Sharim when the school opened and became a tutor and dorm coordinator a few years later. Now she is Sharim's director of admissions. Mrs. Freshtat is a certified life coach and is available to Sharim alumni via phone, email, or even better in person. She is the proud mother of 8 and grandmother of many. Thank you so much, Sandy. We look forward to hearing you. Thank you so much. I'm going to take my video off and put myself on.
Thank you. Can you hear me, see me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. I had the topic is Israel, and I had the beautiful Israeli sun exactly there, so I moved my position. First of all, that was beautiful. What a way to wake up in the morning. For me, it's the afternoon, but now I feel all renewed, like it's morning again. So thank you for this opportunity. So I was asked to speak about something I'm passionate about, and without blinking, I thought of Israel and living in Israel. And this opportunity gave me the opportunity to really think about why. Why is that what I'm passionate about? There's a lot of mitzvot in the Torah. Why that one specifically? Why am I so connected? So that took me down memory lane a bit. How much time do we have, by the way?
We have up to 30 minutes.
Okay. So I'll start from the very beginning. Yeah, so I grew up in a pretty small town in Pennsylvania. Traditional home. My mother was Shomer Shabbos, my father wasn't, but we managed to go to the day school in the local day school. So I had a Jewish education, and I don't really remember hearing much about Israel growing up. What I do remember is the school / shul, it was the same building, had on the stage or bima 2 flags. There was the American flag and there was the Israeli flag. So it was just a thing, like, you know, there's a place called Israel, and that's, you always put it was actually, I think, something required by law that you have, you know, if you have the Israeli flag, you have to have the American flag, but that was something that they wanted, but I didn't think much deeper than that. I do remember one point that there was a big ruckus in school. We didn't, like, educationally, we didn't hear much about Israel except when we learned in the Torah about Israel, but nothing really specific. And then there was this one week that everything seemed different than normal, and the teachers, the rabbis had maps all over the place, and there were radios going, and that was it. And before you blinked, it was over because it was the 6-day war. So that was a memory. I did go to camp, even though I went with a lot of New Yorkers, so I didn't know there's a movement called B'nai Akiva, and they have this camp called Camp Moshava. So I went there not knowing anything about it, but it sort of like threw me into this world of singing Hatikva and standing at something called Mifkad, that you stand up straight and you wear a certain tilboshet, this specific shirt that you wore, and there was this sort of like this whole movement where young people have their peer group, they grow up with them, and they go to Israel after school for a year, and they end up living on kibbutz happily ever after. So that was that certain, I know socialism is in again now, but that was that movement. So that gave me, you know, somewhat of a feeling for Israel. And then I had my first trip to, by the way, if anybody wants to interject anything, that would be great. So I had my first trip to Israel, which was a little bit unusual for a first trip to Israel for young teenagers. I went with my sister and my family members. We ended up staying in a place called Kiryat Sanz, which is very Hasidish, and we were very modern in that that was an interesting scenario altogether. They were not happy about us being there. But we found ourselves in the situation, my sister and I, of being in this totally unfamiliar country with my relatives doing their own thing, and we were kind of on our own. So at the time, there were these amazing bus passes. Now it's funny that they have cards again, but we had a bus pass. I had like a month pass, I guess, where you could just get on a bus anywhere for free. So that's what we had. And it sounds funny now, but we would go to the central bus station in the morning, the two of us, and we'd look at the board and like, wow, Ashdod, that sounds interesting. Or maybe let's go to Nahariya today. That looks cool. And we would sit in the front of the bus because at that time it wasn't reserved for the elderly. Now they're very careful about that. Although I think back then people got up more for the elderly, but anyway, so we sat in the front of the bus listening to the Israeli music and singing along and just drinking in the country in a very simple way. And I feel like we both kind of just fell in love. Hard to explain. You can't always explain this kind of connection, but we started to feel more connected. I went the summer after that. I think it was the summer after that. I'm not sure of the chronology. I'm pretty sure. But the next year was, if any of you remember, 1976, it was the bicentennial year in America, which was a very, very big deal. I remember all year you heard about the big celebrations that were going to be, which I heard now it seems controversial if 1776 was the beginnings of the United States of America. So that's whatever. But back then that was not controversial. So that's where my head was in this bicentennial, but then I was in Israel, and it was actually July 4th, the week of July 4th, and everybody in Israel everybody was thinking, every Jew was thinking only about one thing, which was Entebbe, which was, I don't know how many of you are familiar with what happened, but there was a plane that was hijacked and taken to Uganda, and it was a very, very big drama and a very brave, incredible rescue mission that Bibi Netanyahu's brother was killed in that mission, and then the people came back, which was amazing, and it was incredible. The reunion was incredible. It was the first time I felt unity like that. I was in Israel, and everybody, even though it was all over the world, there was something special about being in Israel at that time, when the entire focus of everyone, no matter what your background, who you were, everyone was focused on saving our people, that they should come back, and then they did, and that made a very, very big impression on me. I went back to the States and went to college, Stern College, which is part of Yeshiva University, and pretty much soon after that was the next war, which was the Yom Kippur War, which was quite devastating, as you all know. Back then, students had an immediate reaction, which was, let's go volunteer. And a little bit different than today, when people sort of exit the country, everybody wanted to go in the country to really help out and volunteer. And the powers that be, the Jewish agency, everyone said, don't come now. Now is not the time to come. It's too dangerous, just wait. And then when the war was over in the fall, they rethought the volunteer idea, because so many, the soldiers are the citizens, and the citizens are the ones that are doing the work. And the kibbutzim were just empty of their soldiers, and they needed help. Simple as that. They needed help to work the land and do the kibbutz jobs that were missing. So there was, I don't remember how many. There was a group of universities. People signed up for this program. We got college credits, and I went to Israel for a semester. That second semester, and it was a very different experience. First, I had that visual experience. This was my only agricultural experience. You would think, being from a small town in Pennsylvania, I would have had that or had some kind of farming experience, but really like digging my hands into the ground and picking out a carrot from the land of Israel and a potato and pulling grapes off a vine and, in the middle of the night because it was so hot, and then having that big, amazing Israeli breakfast. And sometimes when you're doing back-breaking work, looking up and seeing those mountains surrounding me, I was stricken. I felt so close to the country, so connected, and really was telling myself at that point, this is really where I want to make my home. Then I went back to America, finished college, and I felt a very strong void in my life because I was learning and I was observant and I wanted to live in Israel, but there was a Torah void. I hadn't done seminary. In those days, instead of right after high school, a lot of people went junior year, but I had done this kibbutz instead. But I knew I needed to learn, and I knew it had to be in Israel. They say, Ein Torah k'Torat Eretz Yisrael. I felt it intuitively that the Torah that I needed had to be in Israel. There weren't so many seminaries in those days. When I think back, it's ironic because I think if the seminary that I work in now existed, I would have gone there in a heartbeat, but something similar was opening up. I don't know if any of you have heard of Scharfman's. It's been around for a very long time, but I was actually the first year, the pioneer of the school. And I went to the school, and that missing piece was there. I learned more history, learned Zionism maybe in a little more sophisticated, critical way, in a way. And I connected in a different way with Torah, with learning, with the basics, with learning Chumash, and with learning Halacha, and with learning all the basics. It all pulled together for me. And I think, moving in a particular direction of observance as well. At the same time, my husband-to-be was, who is a Baal Tshuva from NCSY. So he was also learning that year, and he learned at a place called BMT. And he came across, with one of his teachers, a few things came up over the year that, in a more intellectual way, and just, he's learning Torah and he's taking on a lot of new things and he's really developing. And he said, wait a minute, it looks like one of the things that I need to take on and I'm supposed to do is we're supposed to live in Israel. He came across the Ramban. There's a Ramban at the end of Acharemot that very clearly says, I have it here, Yeshivat Eretz Yisrael Shkula Keneged Kol HaMitzvot BaTorah. Living in Israel is equal to all the other mitzvot, and he goes on to say a whole bunch of things. Is like we do mitzvah observance as sort of as practice out of Israel, and the real deal, it's practice for when we come to Israel, and that's where it really counts or whatever. So he was like, okay, that's where I need to live. I was more emotional about it, and he was more intellectual about it. We started to date, and we are one of these people that have a very funny story. My maiden name was Freistadt, and my name now is Freistadt with an H, and I had no relatives by that name, and I knew nobody by that name except that we knew about him from NCSY. So our families to this day are still laughing. So we, by the end of the year, we were going to get engaged. And we came back and met our families with the same names, and we got engaged. And we made a decision. We made a pact. My husband, being the more practical one, said, yes, we want to live in Israel, but we can't afford it. So we need to save up our money so we'll be able to come to Israel. And he was right. So basically he had been a more classical musician. He played the French horn, but he became a keyboard player, and he was in, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the orchestras in New York, starting back from Ruach and Ruach Revival, and then Nagina, and then he started his own orchestra called Neshama, which still exists today. So he was working really hard. We got married. We lived in Teaneck, New Jersey, which I loved. We lived there for 2 years in the Garden Apartments. And then one day we had one baby, and one day he said, okay, we need to move to, not to Israel, it wasn't time yet, but we need to move to Brooklyn because my work is there. And, the weddings end so late in America and the drive back was too much. And I was very not happy about that because of previous experiences. And I'm just kind of an out of towner. But we did move to Brooklyn and we lived very simply, and we did not buy a house. Couldn't really afford a house, but looking back, it probably financially would have been the smart thing to do. But I think psychologically, we didn't want to put down our roots, so we didn't buy. So we rented this apartment, and we had 2 more children, Baruch Hashem, girl, boy, girl. And it was getting closer to the 5 years. I was getting used to Brooklyn, and we had our family there. And to be honest, I was petrified. I couldn't even, it wasn't really, what happens, you're very inspired and you come back to America and you just get into things. And I couldn't even really relate so much anymore. So the 5 years, it was getting close to the 5 years, and neither of us are saying anything. And one day he came to me and said, we have to talk. And I'm like, I knew it. I knew we weren't going to go, but I think deep down I was relieved, and I knew what he was going to say, which was basically, this is not the time. And I kind of knew it, the way his business was going, which was in a good direction. We didn't have the money that we needed, and we needed that extra year. So I agreed to the extra year, and deep down I said, this isn't going to happen. Look at everybody around us who thought they were making Aliyah. We're not going to make Aliyah. So I kind of put it out of my mind. And I was very, very happily surprised, and so was everybody else in our lives. Well, not our family so much, but my husband the next year did say, okay, this is it, we're going. And he told his partner, and he sold his half of the business, and we are making Aliyah. And instead of the excitement that I should have been feeling, because my whole life, that was my life dream, I was petrified. I had a very difficult year. I had actually 2 miscarriages that year, a late one and then another one. And I was just, I don't know, not in a good place. And there were 2 people on our block in Brooklyn who had made Aliyah the year before. One were friends of ours. And when they came back to visit and I saw them, I'm like, could you remind me why we're doing this, going through this? Because I was just feeling overwhelmed by everything. And they said, you know what, on Friday afternoon, we can just throw our kids into the back of our station wagon and we can go to Kever Rachel. And I'm embarrassed to say now, because that means a lot to me now, but at the time I couldn't hear it. I was like, okay, wow, that's why we're going, if you say so. But another thing that happened was there was a doctor that we had gone to, a wonderful, wonderful family. And it was a big deal that they made Aliyah. And a lot of, I don't remember how many kids they had. There was a kiddush in shul with a big cake with a plane on it. And it was a very big deal that they went off on Aliyah. And then while we were still in America, they came back. That was devastating. That was devastating. It was just so disheartening to see. And I asked them what happened. And they said, we knew, and this is a doctor, we knew that when we couldn't buy shoes for our children, we had to come back. And I was like horrified, can't buy shoes for your children. And then later on I laughed, because how many times later on did I say to my kids, what, you need another pair of shoes? But so there was a lot of disheartening moments, but we plodded on and we did it. We worked with a Jewish agency. And back then, when you made Aliyah, you went to Merkaz Klita, an absorption center, which I don't do anymore. But it was actually very beneficial for us. It was a lot of, there's always bureaucracy. There was a lot of bureaucracy back then. It was very confusing. We had 3 children and we made Aliyah, and we went to, the leaving was very difficult. Saying goodbye to our families was heart-wrenching. And then when we got to the other end and we finally settled down in this little hut with a little backyard that was ours in Israel, it was such a relief. We felt so good. We were so happy, because it was just all the thinking and overthinking and planning and not planning, it was just a relief to finally be there. And I found it very it was a wonderful time. We were there for 6 months, I think. And it was particularly nice for the women because we bonded and we would tell each other, okay, you're going to this office or that office, and give each other advice. So the joke was that the women would bond and the men would moan because it was harder on the men, but it was really helpful. While we were still in Brooklyn, a couple of years before that, somebody was, Harnof didn't exist. It was called Givat Shaul Bet. And there were people that were selling apartments on paper. And we were one of the people that bought on paper. And unfortunately, there were many scandals back then, but that was one of them. These were not honest people. And it was a whole big thing. We did get the principal of the money back, although we did lose some. So we had said at the time, when we got to Israel, we said, okay, we have to decide where we want to live. And we agreed on one thing: we'll live anywhere except Harnof. And then I spoke to an aunt that I'm very close with, and she said to me, it's not gonna, because I wanted grass and trees and space. And she said, it's not the grass or the trees or the space or the flowers, it's the people. Look for the people that are gonna be your community. And those were very wise words, and that's what we did. So we did end up in Harnof, and we're still here. We rented while this Shlav, any of you know Harnof, there's an upper part called Shlav Bet that didn't exist then, but we bought on paper and we saw it through. At that point, after my 3 kids, and I had those miscarriages, I was like, okay, I have a beautiful family. I'm very happy. 3 kids is wonderful. Right away, Baruch Hashem, I had a girl not that long after. And then a boy, and then a girl, and then a girl and a boy. Did I leave anybody out? Yeah. 8 kids. So something about it there in Israel. I had a lot of children after that, Baruch Hashem. The community was amazing, is amazing. We got very involved in some of the chesed. My husband works in the Hatzalah that was just first starting there. It's very exciting to get into a community when it's being built. And as Naomi said before, I work at Sharim, but in the beginning I learned at Sharim, and then I was a tutor at Sharim, and then I became the house mother, and now I'm the director of missions. I'm a lifer there. It's something I love very, very much. It's a really, really wonderful neighborhood. A big piece that I didn't mention is a lot of the things that we went through in Israel, a lot of the history. Some very, very difficult things like 2 intifadas, which I know you've all heard about, but it was very difficult. It was very difficult. We had a lot of close calls, and it was very close by, and it was really hard to be here at that time. And the Gulf War was insane. It was, my husband was still a musician when he came to Israel, so he would work at nights, and there was a curfew at night, so he would work in the day. So that part was nice. And we had school indoors, and we would have sirens and have to run to our sealed room and wear gas masks. And our families were freaking out. At one point, I remember getting a phone call in our sealed room, if anybody of you are familiar with this history. And my brother-in-law said, come home. And I said through my gas mask, see, people are wearing masks. We're back to masks. And I said, it's okay, we're fine, through a gas mask. It's really funny when you think about it. But like a lot of things in Israel, and then it was over. And it was difficult going through it. I have many different, my children are very different one from the other. 2 of our sons were in the army, and that really was a very interesting experience. We learned a lot from that experience. We're very proud of our sons that were in the army. One of them was in the war, in not this last war in Gaza, although he was involved in some capacity. Actually, he was working on COVID hotels, but the war in 2014 in Gaza, he was there. He was married with twins. That was very difficult to have a son in the war. Baruch Hashem, he came home safely. Not everybody can say that, but living here, you are a part of the history, and there are so many things that go on, and it does bond us together. And then being in Har Nof, we had this terrible terrorist attack, which to this day, I mean, every day that I go to work, I pass the building where it happened, and you can still see the bullet hole there. And the widows are living on that block, and we're reminded of it every day. It was, these were our best and our finest, and it was in a shul, and it was really, really difficult thing to go through. Anyway, so Baruch Hashem, our children are married and they have children. We have 6 that live here and 2 that live in the States. One is making a bar mitzvah soon, and one is following in his father's footsteps and doing music in America, for both of them for Parnassa reasons. And a few of me, I'm part of this organization called CORE that Aliza Cohen is also a part of, mentoring for women, support for women. And a few of us here in Israel, Miriam Shaul and Adela Berman, we are starting an organization called B'Yachad to help women, people that want to make Aliyah. It's unbelievable what's going on. We have friends that are realtors and builders, and they said, they can't build, people are just buying things and looking into it and wanting to make Aliyah. And they have wonderful, the Jewish Agency is amazing, and Nefesh B'Nefesh is amazing. But some of the feedback I got from people that I've been speaking to is sometimes you don't have the personal touch, and sometimes you just want to talk things through. None of us are experts, but we have been living here. Adela came more recently, so that's also helpful in terms of, more recent Aliyah. But we just want to help out. If you or anybody you know is interested in making Aliyah, we would be happy to speak to you about it and weigh the pros and cons. I think we're realists. I realize that it's very difficult. People have a lot of things going on. They have families and elderly parents and businesses and everything else. But there is a feeling, the feeling that I'm getting is that, certainly the United States of America is not the same place that I grew up in. Things are changing, things at an alarming rate. So I think that's what's getting people to think about it more, or other reasons. But anyway, we are here to help you in any way possible. And I'm happy to answer any questions. No idea if I used up my time.
Does anybody have any questions for Sandy? If you can put your hands up so people don't speak at the same time. Does anybody have any questions? So Elaine Joseph, go ahead. Elaine, you want to?
Hi, Elaine Joseph here in Ohio. Oops, here, I'll put my picture, or I'm not sure how to do that. Oh, video, okay. Hi.
Where in Ohio are you?
My husband and I actually live in Zanesville, Ohio, which is an hour east of Columbus. And I'm in Florida for 5 months in Jupiter. And I actually spent time in Har Nof. Our son, who's now in Highland Park, New Jersey, he did Machon Shlomo there. So it's very beautiful, really amazing community. And your story, I so enjoyed your journey story, and thank you so much. Now I have to think of my question. Oh yeah, so I just wondered, I have a friend, she's in her early 70s, and she's hopes to make Aliyah. She has 2 kids there. So I just wondered what, who she would contact. Did you say it's called Yachad?
Yeah, look, she, for all the technical Aliyah things, Nefesh B'Nefesh is the organization to call to get everything going and to give her all the technical information. But she can contact me, and I'd be happy to speak to her about any of the practical decisions she would have to make. I imagine that her children are very involved in helping her as well.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure they were aware of your organization as well. So it's just to look up Yachad.
Biyachad, no, there's nothing to look out.
Oh, Biyachad.
This is in the infancy. We are just
Oh,
we are
okay.
launching this. So I can put my information up.
Sandy, I'll share, not to worry, people shouldn't worry, that I'll share your information on the WhatsApp groups.
Great.
So
Thank
that
you.
so everybody has it. So in case that they want to get in touch with you, that's not a problem.
Thank
Charlene, do
you.
you have a question? Go ahead. Charlene, do you have a question? Charlene? I see someone's hand up, but she doesn't.
She's
Charlene?
muted.
Yeah, she's muted. Yeah. Yeah. Sandy, what year did you go to seminary? What year did you?
Okay, 1977. It was, people always say to me, oh, you're the first year of Sharpman's. Do you know this one? Do you know that? I'm like, no.
I was just going to say that because
nobody knows my year. My year is the unknown year, and it's way before anybody knows, but I was there.
Right, because because there was only Sharpman's at that point, really. There was Sharpman's and Machon Gold. That was it. In late 70s, early 80s, there was Sharpman's and Machon Gold for girls. And there was Michlala. Those were the only three.
And Neve was really only for Balei Tshuva. Yeah, it was different, and I was older. I was going to go to Michlala, but they wanted me to be with the 18-year-olds. And ironically, Sharpman's started off being for older women, and then it moved to being an 18-year-old seminary. So it was just perfect for me at the time. Life-changing, amazing place. The Sharpman's are amazing.
Wow. Robin, I see Robin has a question. Go ahead, Robin, and then we're going to do our Shmiras Halashon. Robin, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself.
Oh, not even a question, but a comment. My husband and I just made Aliyah last year in our early 70s. Gan Eden.
Welcome.
Really.
Where are you? Where are you living?
We're in Jerusalem. We're actually in New York for the summer with the grandchildren, but we're in Jerusalem and
Where?
in Katamon.
Oh, beautiful.
And even with no language yet, and weak reading, it's amazing. We left our grandchildren in New York and went, and there's no place else we'd rather be.
Robin, are the children thinking of it? Are they your kids?
Yes, they are. They are. But my son is a rabbi, and he's, there's Parnassa issues, and his Rebbe thinks he's doing a great job here. But they are definitely thinking about it, for sure thinking about it. But
topic is, yeah, one
I
second.
chose a cake like yours because I like your cake. It's so cute. And your favorite color.
What?
No, somebody just had to mute
Oh.
themselves. Go ahead.
Okay. Robin, welcome. It's really wonderful. My sister, I know the neighborhood. Where are you? Where will you be davening?
my husband goes to Nitzanim, and I go to Eretz Hemda.
Beautiful, beautiful. So beautiful there. I love visiting.
Beautiful.
My sister. Yeah. Welcome.
Can't wait to go home.
Wow.
Okay, so one more question. I think Charlene wanted to ask you a question, then we're going to do Shmiras Halashon. Charlene?
Yes, please. Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I made Aliyah myself when I was in 77. I was single. I lived 7 beautiful years in Yerushalayim. I won't go into detail. My question is, your group Yachad, you can give some kind of support besides Nefesh B'Nefesh. And I wanted to know, what's your advice for a couple who's moving to Israel with 3 children, as far as taking time to look around what should they do, Ulpan, and then look around for what's the first thing, the good school, good neighborhood, what's the criteria of all that? And would you be able to help them?
I think so. I mean, everybody has different criteria, and it can be very, very confusing. I think like Beit Shemesh is the popular place now, but that's also confusing because there's so many different places there, and people do have an attachment to Jerusalem, and it can be very confusing. And I think one of the hardest decisions is actually the school. You know, you come to school kids, schools is going to be everything. Your success of your aliyah is the happiness of your children, really, in a big way. So I would be happy to speak to them. Again, I'm not, I just,
Okay.
these are just my thoughts, and
Okay.
I'm happy to brainstorm with anybody about
Thank you.
possibilities.
So I will put up Sandy's information. I think, Javier, you wanted to say something? Javier, are you still on? I didn't see, I only saw it in the chat now.
I do. I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. I have a bad amipachate. Sorry. Sandy, I just wanted to say, my name is Javier. I just wanted to say thank you so much for your speech. It was very inspirational. And one of the things that when Nomi introduced you at the beginning, which is super powerful, which is one of the many jobs that she said that you do, that you keep up with alumni from Sharim. And I think that that's so important, that you keep up with people after they've made the change, after they've been in seminary, after they made the
Okay, I'm
change.
leaving.
And it's the same thing also when people make aliyah, that very often there's the light and the excitement about making aliyah, and it's so important and it's so special and it's great. But then there's like the afterwards, which can, like you said in your story, that it can get a little bit complicated and things can get a little bit tricky. And that I think is so important, that B'ezrat Hashem, hopefully your organization will be able to help the people after also, because that is when things get a little bit tricky.
100%.
Like with what you do with the alumni also.
The follow-up is everything. I think also with Balei Tshuva, I sometimes feel like that. Okay, now I'm here and I'm observant. Where'd y'all go?
Totally.
It's like- and then they need the support even more. I really couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Okay, Sandy,
Incredible.
thank you so much for sharing. It was incredible. I'm going to share your information with the groups, and people can get in touch with you. I'm going to call you too and speak to you about it. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For
And
the opportunity.
thank you. Thank you for sharing. It was amazing. Thank you. I'm going to do Shmir Salashon. We're on day 65. If I'm right. Yeah, we're on day 65.
Hello and welcome to day 65. Today, the Chavetz Chaim talks about money fights, and he says if you've ever been approached by anybody involved in a monetary dispute, you'll probably find that in his opinion, his opponent's completely wrong with no justification at all for whatever he's thinking or doing, and quite possibly, he says, if you'd speak to the other party in the same dispute, you'd find a very reasonable